"Now that Harold's dead, pack your bags and leave," Vanessa said, swirling her wine like it was an ordinary Tuesday night. I froze, the spoon halfway to my mouth. My black sweater still smelled faintly of lilies from Harold's funeral 3 days ago. Across the table, my son Brian didn't even look at me. He just nodded. "Yeah, Mom. The house was never really yours anyway." For a moment, the world went silent. I could hear the clock ticking, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the blood pounding in my ears. This was my house. 40 years. Harold and I built a life here, raised Brian under this roof. Every crack in the tiles, every creak in the floorboards, every corner held a memory. And now my own son was erasing me. Vanessa set her wine glass down carefully, like she was afraid to chip the crystal. "You should start looking for a retirement home, Evelyn. This place is too big for you alone. Besides, we've already been talking to a contractor about renovating." "Renovating?" I choked on the word. Brian shifted uncomfortably. "It'll be easier if you don't fight us on this. Dad wouldn't want you rattling around here. It's not practical." Not practical. My fingers dug into the edge of the table. I thought of all the meals I'd cooked here, the birthday candles I lit, the nights I sat waiting for Brian to come home safe. Not practical? I wanted to scream, to tell them Harold promised I'd be taken care of, that he said I'd never want for anything. But the words caught in my throat. Vanessa sighed dramatically. "Look, Evelyn, you can stay for a few weeks, but after that, we need you to go. This house isn't yours." I looked at my son. His eyes were flat, distant, the same eyes I used to kiss goodnight. Something inside me broke, not loudly, not like glass shattering, more like a rope fraying, strand by strand. I pushed my chair back. The sound of wood scraping against tile echoed like a gunshot. "You don't need to worry about me rattling around here," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll pack my things tonight," Vanessa smirked. Brian let out a breath, like I'd made things easier for them. I walked past them, brushing my fingers against the photo of Harold on the sideboard. His smile had been so certain. "You'll never want for anything, Evie." But Harold was gone, and so was my place in this house. That night, I sat alone in the guest bedroom, though calling it my bedroom now felt wrong. The space was bare. My things had been packed into boxes and shoved into the corner days ago, so Vanessa could measure for new curtains. My closet stood open, empty hangers clinking like tiny bones. Even my pillow smelled faintly of her hairspray. The laughter started in the hallway around midnight. I heard Brian's voice, low and amused. "So what do you think about knocking that wall out first? Open concept." Vanessa giggled. "God, yes. This place is a time capsule. We'll gut the kitchen, too. Those cabinets are hideous." Their footsteps creaked above me. My son, my own flesh and blood, pacing in my house, planning its demolition while I lay there invisible. Vanessa whispered something I couldn't hear. Then her voice rose, sharper. "She won't fight us, Brian. She's too fragile. You saw how quickly she agreed to leave? She's grateful we're even letting her stay a few weeks." They both laughed then. The sound felt like a knife slicing through the quiet. I curled tighter under the thin blanket. My hands gripped the edge until my knuckles turned white. Too fragile. They thought I was weak, that I'd shuffle out quietly like a ghost and leave them this house on a silver platter. But they didn't know me. Not really. I stared at the ceiling, tracing the cracks Harold and I had always meant to patch. We talked about repainting this room someday, maybe turning it into a little nursery, if we were lucky enough for grandkids to visit. Now Vanessa was planning to turn it into her yoga room. I couldn't cry, not anymore. The tears had dried up at dinner. Instead, my chest ached with something heavier than grief, humiliation. I'd lived my entire adult life believing family meant safety. That Harold's son would protect me the way Harold did. I was wrong. From the hallway came the faint clink of wine glasses. Vanessa's voice again, smug this time. "She doesn't realize how much easier life will be without her here. No more tiptoeing around an old lady, no more dead weight." Dead weight. I pressed my fist to my mouth to keep from making a sound. The bed felt cold. The walls seemed to close in, squeezing the air out of the room. I wanted to scream, to storm upstairs and tell them the truth, that this house wasn't some prize they could grab the moment Harold's body went cold. But I didn't, because I didn't have proof yet. I lay there, staring into the dark, and made a vow to myself. Let them laugh tonight. Tomorrow I'll find out where I really stand. I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I slipped outside barefoot and walked to the old gazebo Harold built for me on our 10th anniversary. The paint was peeling, the wood damp with dew, but it felt safer than the house. "Did you know they'd do this to me?" I whispered into the still air. Harold's photo rested in my palm, worn from years in my wallet. His smile looked steady, certain. "You'll never want for anything, Evie." That's what he used to say. But here I was, unwanted in my own home. Vanessa's voice still rang in my ears. "She won't fight us. She's too fragile." I tightened my grip on the photo. Maybe Harold had known something. Toward the end, he'd been secretive about his accounts, about the business. I hadn't questioned him. I thought he was just tired. But Harold wasn't careless. He prepared for storms. I rose from the bench, my knees stiff. The sun was climbing now, light pooling across the grass. Upstairs, I heard faint footsteps. Brian and Vanessa waking to their new world, still thinking I was too weak to challenge them. They didn't know me, not really. Today, I'd go to the bank, and if Harold had left me anything, I'd use it. The bank smelled like lemons and printer ink. I stood at the counter clutching my handbag, my fingers damp against the worn leather. "I'd like to speak to someone about closing my husband's accounts," I said softly. The teller smiled politely and led me to a glass-walled office. "Mrs. Harper? You can speak with Mr. Reynolds. He'll help you with everything." I stepped inside. The man behind the desk looked young, too young to be talking to widows about money, but his eyes were kind. "Mrs. Harper, I'm very sorry for your loss," he said. "Let's go over Harold's accounts and make this as simple as we can." I nodded and slid the stack of death certificates and marriage papers across the desk. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. "You'll never want for anything, Evie." Harold's voice echoed in my mind. I clung to it, even as Mr. Reynolds typed quickly, his brow furrowed. "Okay," he said finally, swiveling the screen toward me. "Here are the accounts tied to your husband's name. Now before we proceed, there's something I need to verify." He hesitated. "What is it?" I asked, my voice thin. He reached for a folder in the drawer and set it gently on the desk. The paper inside looked heavy, official. "Harold set up some arrangements in advance. Some of these accounts, they're in your name, Mrs. Harper. Sole ownership." My heart stuttered. "Mine? Are you sure?" "Yes." He slid the folder closer. "There's also this." A deed. A second property I'd never heard of. An oceanfront cottage 2 hours south. He never told me," I whispered. Mr. Reynolds smiled faintly. "Some people like to prepare quietly. He left instructions here for you as well." My fingers trembled as I unfolded the letter tucked inside. "Evie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I wanted to make sure you were safe no matter what. Don't let anyone push you out of what's yours. You're stronger than you think. Love, Harold." The words blurred as tears welled in my eyes. I swallowed hard and folded the letter back neatly. Vanessa's smirk flashed in my mind, her voice dripping with disdain. "This house isn't yours, Evelyn." But it was. All of it. They didn't own a single brick. I'd like copies of everything, please," I said quietly. "Of course." As Mr. Reynolds printed the documents, a warmth spread through my chest. Not joy, not yet, but something close to relief. For the first time in days, I felt the faintest ember of power. By the time I stepped out of the bank, my legs felt like water. The folder in my handbag seemed heavier than bricks. Harold's letter, the deeds, the account statements, they were all there, but my thoughts kept circling the same thing. They don't own a single brick. I do. I didn't want to go back to the house. Not yet. Not while Vanessa was probably swanning around measuring for new curtains, and Brian was pretending I didn't exist. So I turned left instead of right. Iris's kitchen smelled like lemon balm and fresh-baked bread when she opened the door. "Evie," she said, surprised. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I need tea," I murmured, clutching my bag like it might vanish. "And maybe advice." "Come in, sit down." She didn't ask anything else. Not at first. just poured steaming chamomile into a chipped china cup and pushed the sugar bowl toward me. "Now," she said gently, "tell me everything." I set the bag on the table, hands trembling. "Harold left me more than I thought. A lot more." Iris's sharp green eyes flicked to mine. "More?" "The house, the accounts, even a second property, an oceanfront cottage. It's all in my name." She let out a low whistle. "Well, thank God for Harold. He always was a planner. But, Evie, why do you look like you're about to cry instead of celebrate?" "Because Brian and Vanessa think they've already won," I said flatly. "They're planning renovations, laughing about how I'm too fragile to fight them." Iris's lips pressed tight. She set her cup down with a soft clink. "Fragile? Is that what they said?" "Yes. Evie, listen to me." She leaned forward, her voice low but fierce. "You are not fragile. You are a woman who built a life, raised a family, and held it all together. Harold knew they might pull something like this. That's why he gave you the tools to fight." I stared down at the tea, watching the steam curl and vanish. "Do you know what Vanessa called me?" "Dead weight," I whispered. "And Brian, he just nodded like I wasn't even there." Iris reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Her grip was strong, grounding. "Then prove them wrong." The words hung in the air, heavy and electric. "I don't even know where to begin," I said. "They're already making plans. Contractors, movers." "Then start making your own plans," Iris said firmly. "Call a lawyer. Gather your documents. Don't let them bulldoze over you." I thought of Harold's letter again. "Don't let anyone push you out of what's yours. You're stronger than you think. Maybe they were both right." "I know a good attorney," Iris continued. "He helped my cousin when her stepchildren tried to take her house. Smart as a whip. Discreet." I looked up. "You do that for me?" "Evie?" Iris's eyes softened. "You've been there for everyone else your whole life. Let someone be there for you now." Something shifted in my chest. Small, but undeniable. Not anger. Not yet. Resolve. I straightened my shoulders and took a long sip of tea. It was bitter, but it woke me up. "I'll call the lawyer," I said quietly. "And I'll start gathering my papers tonight." Iris smiled. "That's my girl." By the time I stepped back into the house, the air felt heavier somehow. Boxes still lined the hallway. My boxes, half packed by Vanessa, as if she couldn't wait to erase me. Upstairs, I heard faint laughter. Brian's voice, low and amused. I gripped the banister tighter and whispered to myself, "Just get your papers and leave. Don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you flinch." In my room, no, their guest room now, I knelt carefully and pulled out the old suitcase from under the bed. One by one, I stacked my marriage certificate, Harold's will, and the deed copies into a folder Iris had given me. When I reached for the jewelry box, my hand brushed something hard and unfamiliar. A business card, yellowed with age, Harold's handwriting on the back. "Tom Carter, foreman, a friend if you ever need one." I stared at it for a long moment, the memory surfacing like a ripple. Tom. He'd worked with Harold for decades at the construction company, always came by for coffee on Saturday mornings, always looked out for Harold like a brother. If anyone knew what Harold intended for the business, it's him. The floor creaked in the hallway. Vanessa's voice floated through the door. "We'll tell her tonight. The contractor's coming first thing in the morning." My stomach nodded. No time to hesitate. I shoved the papers into my handbag, tucked the business card into my pocket, and slipped out the back door before they noticed. Tom's workshop smelled like sawdust and motor oil, just like it always had. "Evie?" His voice boomed from the back, warm and familiar. He emerged from behind a stack of lumber, wiping his hands on a rag. "I was wondering when you'd come by." "You were expecting me?" I asked cautiously. Tom nodded, his face lined but steady. "Harold told me years ago, if anything happens to me, Evie might need a friend. Be that friend. So here I am." I clutched my handbag tighter, the folder inside brushing against my elbow. "I found out yesterday," I said quietly. "The house, the accounts, Harold put them all in my name." Tom's brows furrowed. "Good. He wanted to make sure you'd be safe." "I thought I'd be safe with Brian and Vanessa," I said bitterly. "But they're already acting like the house is theirs." calling me fragile. Dead weight. Tom's jaw tightened. I always had a bad feeling about that woman. Brian, he's a good man deep down, but he lets her pull his strings. I'm not so sure anymore. Tom gestured to a workbench and pulled up a stool. Sit down a minute. You look like you've been carrying the weight of the world. I sank onto the stool, the wood cool against my palms. Iris said I need a lawyer, I said, but I don't even know what to tell him. I've never fought for anything in my life. That's not true, Tom said gently. You built a marriage, a family, a home. That takes fight, Evie. It just looked different then. I swallowed hard. They think I'll just roll over, I murmured. Like I'm too weak to stand up for myself. Then don't prove them right. Tom's voice sharpened. You've got every right to that house. And Harold's company, too, I blinked. The company? Harold left his share to you. He said you'd know what to do with it. My stomach flipped. I didn't even know I had a stake in it. You do, Tom said. And if Brian's been using company funds for his projects, you'll want to keep an eye on the books. Something cold settled in my gut. Will you help me? I asked. Of course. Harold trusted me, and I trust you. I exhaled slowly, the tension in my chest loosening just a little. Then, I'll call the lawyer today, I said, and I'll start gathering my papers. Good girl. Tom gave me a small, proud smile. As I stood to leave, I ran my fingers along the smooth grain of the workbench. Harold used to come home with sawdust in his hair, laughing about the men's poker games out back. This place was part of him. Now it was part of me, too. Thank you, Tom, I said. You don't have to thank me, Evie. Just promise me one thing. What? When the time comes, don't hesitate. Take back what's yours. I nodded, gripping my handbag tighter. I will. By the time I left Tom's workshop, the sun was already low in the sky. I gripped the steering wheel tighter as I turned into the neighborhood. The folder in my handbag felt like a shield. Harold's deeds. The bank accounts. His quiet letter telling me I was stronger than I believed. But I hadn't collected everything yet. There were still papers in the old cedar chest in the upstairs hall, insurance statements, tax records, and the notarized letter Harold once gave me about the house. I'd left them behind when I fled this morning, afraid Brian and Vanessa would hear me rummaging. Now I needed to get them without raising suspicion. I parked at the curb and sat for a moment, breathing slowly. From the front window, I could see the glow of the television in the living room. Their laughter spilled into the night air, muffled but sharp. Vanessa's laugh, the same one she used when she called me fragile. Dead weight. I stepped out of the car quietly, locking it with my key instead of the beep from the remote. The driveway was lined with rose bushes I planted years ago. I brushed against one and felt a thorn prick my hand, but I didn't flinch. Quiet, Evelyn. Just walk in like you belong. Because you do. The door creaked slightly as I pushed it open. Mom? Brian's voice floated from the living room. I froze, my fingers tightening around the strap of my handbag. Yes? I called back, forcing my tone to stay calm. You're home late, he said. Vanessa saved you some dinner. I'm not hungry, just tired, going up to lie down. Okay. His voice faded back into the hum of the television. I slipped off my shoes and padded up the stairs, my heart thudding in my ears. In the hall, the cedar chest sat under the window, its brass hinges dulled with age. Harold and I used to keep Christmas ornaments in it, but over the years it became the catch-all for every important document. I knelt and eased it open. There they were, the insurance papers, the original mortgage payoff letter, and the notarized amendment Harold insisted we file 5 years ago, just in case, he'd said. My fingers shook as I stacked them neatly and slipped them into a second folder. A knock on the door made me jump. Mom? Brian's voice again, closer this time. Yes? My voice cracked. You okay in there? I cleared my throat. Just changing for bed. The floor creaked as he shifted his weight. We're meeting the contractor tomorrow morning about gutting the kitchen. I'd like you to be there. Vanessa thinks it'll help you accept the changes. I swallowed hard. Of course, I said softly. A pause. Then his footsteps retreated. When I was sure he was gone, I slipped the folder into my handbag and zipped it shut. My breath came in shallow bursts as I stood, my knees aching. I looked around the hall one last time. The wedding photo on the wall. The scratch on the baseboard from when Brian raced his toy trucks as a boy. They didn't see these memories. To them, this house was drywall and profit. But to me, it was Harold's promise, and I wasn't about to let them take it. The sound of tape ripping snapped me awake. At first, I thought I was dreaming. Then I heard heavy boots on the stairs and the thud of cardboard sliding across the floorboards. I threw on my sweater and hurried down the hallway. The living room was full of strangers. Movers in gray uniforms hefted boxes, their gloved hands wrapping my china in crinkled paper. The family photo album's 40 years of memories were stacked neatly in a corner, marked in black Sharpie. Guest room, fragile. Vanessa stood in the middle of it all, arms folded, a smirk playing on her lips. "Morning, Evelyn," she said, sweetly, like we were chatting over coffee. "Don't worry, we're helping you pack for that retirement home. It'll be less stressful this way." The world tilted. My knees threatened to give out, but I gripped the banister hard, forcing myself upright. I didn't ask for this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Vanessa tilted her head. "No, but you seemed overwhelmed. This house is too much for you, and Brian and we've been so patient. It's time, Evelyn." One of the movers brushed past me, holding Harold's leather chair. His chair, the one where he used to sit every Sunday morning reading the paper. "Put that down," I said sharply. The man hesitated, glancing at Vanessa. "Go ahead," she said. "Mom's just adjusting." Brian appeared in the doorway, his brow furrowed but his mouth set firm. "Mom, it's for the best. We'll make sure your things are set up in the retirement suite." "The retirement suite?" I repeated, my voice cracking. "Yes," Vanessa chirped. "We toured a lovely place yesterday. You'll have your own little kitchenette and a view of the parking lot." I looked around. The rosewood cabinet Harold built with his own hands. Gone. The quilt my mother gave me for our wedding, stuffed into a plastic bin. My life reduced to labels and boxes. But deep in my handbag was a folder. The bank papers. The deeds. The trust Harold set up for me. "They don't know yet," I reminded myself. "They think I'm powerless." I forced my hands to unclench. "Vanessa," I said evenly, "please, let me handle my things. I can pack for myself." Vanessa gave a mock sympathetic pout. "But sweetie, you've been so fragile lately. We don't want you to strain yourself." I looked her dead in the eye. I said, "Stop." For a heartbeat, the room froze. Even the movers glanced nervously between us. Vanessa's smile slipped. Then Brian stepped in. "Why don't you go rest, Mom? We'll finish up here." "No," I gripped my bag tighter. "I'm going to Iris's house, and when I come back, I expect every single box put back where it was." Vanessa crossed her arms. "If you leave, don't expect to come back." I stared at her, my heart pounding. "You may want to check the deed before you make threats," I said softly. I didn't wait for an answer. I walked out the door with my head high, though my hands were shaking. I didn't cry. Not yet. But when Iris opened her door and pulled me into her warm, lemon-scented kitchen, the tears came fast and hot. "Iris," I whispered, clutching her arm. "I need your help." Iris let me stay in her guest room that night. The bedspread smelled faintly of lavender, and the little clock on the nightstand ticked louder than it should have. I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my mind churning with boxes, movers, and Vanessa's smug smile. "You don't belong here anymore, Evelyn." That's what her eyes had said, but Harold's voice cut through the noise. "Don't let anyone push you out of what's yours." At sunrise, I got up, dressed carefully, and padded into the kitchen. Iris was already there, a steaming mug of coffee in her hands. "You didn't sleep, did you?" she asked softly. "No." "Then let's fix that knot in your stomach," she said, handing me her phone. "Call the lawyer. Today." By mid-morning, we were sitting across from a man in a crisp navy suit. The lawyer's office smelled of leather and old paper, sunlight spilling across the polished desk. "Mrs. Harper," he began gently, I've reviewed your late husband's files and the trust documents you provided. My hands tightened in my lap. Iris reached over and gave them a reassuring squeeze. The lawyer flipped a page and looked up. Your husband placed everything, the house, the business, and all associated savings, solely in your name. You are the legal owner. The words landed like a stone in a still pond, sending ripples through me. I am? Yes, he nodded. Your son and daughter-in-law have no legal claim to the property or the accounts. None. For a moment, I didn't know if I was going to laugh or cry. All this time, I whispered, they acted like they were doing me a favor, like I should be grateful for their charity. They were bluffing, Iris said firmly. They counted on you not knowing your rights. The lawyer folded his hands on the desk. I recommend we draft a cease and desist letter immediately to prevent further interference from them. You also have grounds to request repayment if any of your funds were misused. I took a shaky breath and nodded. Do it. Send the letter. As we stepped out of the office, the sunlight hit my face like a warm hand. For the first time in days, I exhaled fully, my chest no longer knotted tight. You okay? Iris asked. No, I said softly, but I'm getting there. We walked together toward her car, my heels clicking against the pavement. The folder in my arms felt lighter now, not like a burden, but like a weapon. Vanessa and Brian thought they'd broken me. They had no idea what was coming. The car ride back to the house was silent, except for the soft hum of the tires on asphalt. I sat in the back seat, clutching my handbag like a lifeline. The folder inside held the cease and desist letter, notarized and heavy with the weight of Harold's foresight. Beside me, Mr. Fletcher, my lawyer, checked his watch calmly. We'll keep it brief, he said. Deliver the letter. State the facts. No arguing. I nodded, though my palms were damp. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about Harold's promise. It was about dignity. And for the first time in days, I wasn't walking in alone. Vanessa opened the door when we arrived. Her smile faltered the moment she saw Mr. Fletcher at my side. Well, she said after a beat, didn't expect you back so soon, Evelyn. We were just talking about finishing up the packing. I'll bet you were, I said softly. Brian appeared behind her, arms crossed. Mom, what's this about? Who's this man? I'm Mr. Fletcher, Mrs. Harper's attorney. Brian's brow furrowed. Attorney? For what? For this, Mr. Fletcher replied coolly, holding out the letter. This is a formal cease and desist. You are hereby ordered to immediately stop any and all efforts to remove Mrs. Harper from her home or alter the property in any way. Vanessa let out a sharp laugh. Oh, this is cute. Really, Evelyn? A lawyer? It's not cute, Mr. Fletcher said, his tone flat as stone. The house, the business, and all associated assets are legally and solely in Mrs. Harper's name. You have no claim here. For a long moment, no one spoke. Brian's face went red. That's impossible. The house was Dad's. It was always supposed to be mine. Incorrect, Mr. Fletcher said. Your father placed it in a trust for Mrs. Harper. That trust is ironclad. Vanessa's lips curled. She doesn't even know how to run a household anymore, let alone manage a trust. Maybe you should be talking to us about power of attorney. My spine straightened. No, Vanessa, I said quietly. You've been speaking for me long enough. But not anymore. Vanessa blinked, caught off guard by the steel in my voice. You came into my home, packed my belongings, and tried to erase me like I was already dead, I continued. You thought I'd be too weak to fight back. You were wrong. Brian stepped forward, his voice rising. You don't understand how hard things have been for us, Mom. Vanessa and I. Stop, I said. He froze. You don't get to make excuses, I said, my voice calm but steady. This isn't your house. It never was. You and Vanessa will pack your own things now and leave. Mr. Fletcher cleared his throat. If you refuse to vacate, we will file for a court order to have you removed and pursue damages for any property mishandling. Brian's hands curled into fists, but Vanessa grabbed his arm. Let's talk about this later, she said through gritted teeth. We don't need to make a scene. "You've already made one," I said, stepping past them into the hallway. The living room still smelled faintly of cardboard and packing tape, but as I stood there, I realized something had shifted. This was no longer a place of fear. This was my house. And for the first time in days, I felt like I could finally breathe inside it again. I closed the bedroom door behind me and leaned against it, letting out a long, shaky breath. For the first time in weeks, the master bedroom was mine again. No moving boxes, no strangers hauling my life into cardboard, no Vanessa's perfume clinging to the air like poison. Just me and Harold's faint cologne still lingering in the closet. I set my handbag carefully on the dresser. The leather folder inside, Harold's trust, the cease and desist letter, the deeds, felt heavier than ever. This wasn't over. Not yet. I crossed to the window and pulled the curtains open. Moonlight spilled across the floorboards, catching the edge of the quilt Harold and I had picked out on our 25th anniversary. I used to love this room. We painted the walls together, Harold on the ladder, me holding the tray and laughing every time he got a streak of cream paint in his hair. Now, standing here alone, I felt the weight of every memory pressing down. "You'll never want for anything, Evie." That's what Harold had promised. But he never imagined it would be our son trying to take everything we built. Downstairs, I could hear muffled voices, Brian and Vanessa arguing in low, angry tones. "She'll never manage it all," Vanessa hissed. "She'll cave. She's weak." "No," Brian said. "Not like before. Something's changed." They were right about one thing. Something had changed. I sat on the edge of the bed, my fingers brushing the wooden frame. Harold built this bed with his own hands, sanding every groove until it felt like silk. He worked on it every evening after dinner, saying, "One day this will outlive us both." And yet here I was, alone in it, but not broken, not anymore. For years, I'd let Brian take loans, handouts, excuses. Every time he came to Harold with another emergency, I stayed silent. I didn't want to believe our son would use us like that. Now I saw it clearly. Every dollar Harold handed over was a rope Brian used to try to strangle me out of my own home. Not anymore. I stood and walked to the vanity. My reflection stared back at me. Older, yes. Tired, yes. But not fragile, not dead weight. "You thought I was weak," I whispered to the empty room. "But you were wrong." Harold trusted me with everything he'd built. The house, the savings, even the business. Now I had a choice. I could protect it quietly, live out my days in peace, and let Brian and Vanessa fade from my life. Or I could hold them accountable for every penny they stole, every ounce of dignity they tried to strip from me. The sound of a car door slamming outside snapped me from my thoughts. I peeked through the curtain. Brian and Vanessa stood by their car, arguing heatedly under the porch light. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. They were already plotting. I turned away from the window, my decision made. Tomorrow, I would call Mr. Fletcher and ask him to start proceedings to recover Harold's loans from Brian. If my son wanted to treat me like a stranger, I would treat him like one too. This was no longer about family. This was war. The next morning, I woke before the sun. I didn't want to see Brian and Vanessa at breakfast. Didn't want to hear their voices or catch their smug glances. So I slipped out quietly, my handbag clutched tight, and drove to Mr. Fletcher's office. "Mrs. Harper," he said, rising as I entered. "I wasn't expecting you so soon." "I can't wait any longer," I said firmly. "I want to protect what Harold left me, and I want to make sure Brian and Vanessa can't take a single thing more." He gestured for me to sit. "You've already done the hardest part by standing your ground. Now let's talk about your options." An hour later, we had a plan. Step 1, file an injunction to freeze all renovations and block any contractors from altering the property. Step 2, audit Harold's business accounts with Tom's help to uncover any irregularities, especially the loans Brian had begged for over the years. Step 3, if the numbers confirmed what we suspected, sue for repayment and damages. "You're not just defending your home anymore," Mr. Fletcher said. "You're reclaiming everything that's yours." I nodded slowly, the weight of it settling in my chest. "They'll fight back," I murmured. "Yes," he said, "but this time, you'll be ready." I met Tom at Harold's old workshop that afternoon. The smell of sawdust and varnish clung to the air like memory. "You're really doing it, huh?" Tom said, pulling off his work gloves. "I don't have a choice," I said. Harold trusted me to protect what he built. If Brian's been using company money to bankroll his lifestyle, Tom shook his head. Harold suspected as much, but he never wanted to believe it. That boy's been bleeding the accounts dry. "I want the books," I said quietly. "Every ledger, every statement. I want to see it all." Tom gave me a long look, then nodded. "I'll help you. Harold asked me to watch over the company if anything ever happened to him. But he also said this: if Evie asks questions one day, tell her the truth. Don't sugarcoat it." We spent hours in the office upstairs, flipping through binders, logging into accounts, piecing together a puzzle Harold had tried to hold in place during his last months alive. Tom ran a finger down a ledger column and cursed under his breath. "Here," he jabbed the page. "Brian's withdrawals. Thousands over the past 5 years. Business expenses. But half of these are personal. Fancy dinners, a trip to Cabo, a designer bag for Vanessa." My stomach turned. "Do we have enough to bring to the lawyer?" I asked. Tom's jaw tightened. "More than enough." As the sun set, I left the workshop feeling heavier but stronger. Brian and Vanessa thought they'd cornered me. They didn't know I was about to push back harder than they ever imagined. At home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I climbed the stairs slowly, listening for voices. But their bedroom door was closed, faint light flickering beneath it. I could imagine them in there, plotting, whispering about contractors and kitchen islands, confident they'd wear me down. They didn't know the walls were already closing in on them. In my room, I set my bag on the dresser and stared at Harold's photo for a long moment. "I'm doing this for us," I whispered. "But more than that, I'm doing it for me." The knock at the door came just after lunch. I'd been sitting at the kitchen table, organizing Harold's old ledgers into neat piles for Mr. Fletcher, when the sound made me jump. Brian never knocked. Neither did Vanessa. When I opened the door, a young man in a suit stood there holding a thick envelope. "Mrs. Harper?" he asked. "Yes." He handed me the papers with a practiced expression, neutral, almost apologetic. "You've been served." I stood there in the doorway long after he'd gone, staring down at the envelope in my trembling hands. The words at the top were bold and sharp: "Petition to contest trust and transfer power of attorney." My heart thudded hard in my chest as I flipped through the pages. Grounds: mental decline, emotional instability, undue influence over the deceased. Harold Harper. My knees buckled. I stumbled to the kitchen table, gripping the edge like it might stop the spinning in my head. They weren't just trying to steal my house anymore. They were trying to erase me. Iris arrived within 15 minutes of my phone call. When she saw the papers spread out across the table, her eyes went sharp. "They're saying you're not competent to manage Harold's estate," she hissed. "Those vipers. They think if they paint me as confused, frail, the court will hand everything to them," I whispered. "They're grasping at straws, Evie. They know they're losing." "Maybe," I said, "but they're still dangerous." I touched the place on the page where Vanessa had signed her name in elegant loops, my stomach churning. This isn't about family anymore. This is war. That afternoon, Mr. Fletcher called an emergency meeting at his office. "They're trying to establish that you're mentally unfit to manage the trust," he explained calmly. "It's a classic tactic, unethical, but not uncommon when money's involved. They're going to tell lies about me," I said, my voice tight. "Yes," he said, "but we're going to make sure those lies don't stick." He laid out a counter-strategy: medical evaluations to confirm my competence, character witnesses who could attest to my stability, financial records proving Harold's decisions were deliberate and uncoerced. "This isn't just about defense," Mr. Fletcher said. "We're going to prove you're the rightful executor of Harold's wishes and that your son and daughter-in-law have been exploiting you." I nodded slowly, my fingers curled tight in my lap. For a moment, I thought about Brian as a boy, how he'd cried the first time he scraped his knee, how Harold and I had stayed up all night nursing him through chickenpox. That boy was gone. This man was a stranger to me now. That night, back in my room, I sat on the bed with Harold's photo in my hands. "They're calling me incompetent," I whispered. Harold's steady eyes seemed to stare right through me. "You're stronger than they'll ever know, Evie." And for the first time, I believed it. Downstairs, I heard Vanessa's voice through the vents. "She's not gonna last, Brian. One court date, and she'll fold." I smiled faintly. Let them think that. In the morning, I would meet with Mr. Fletcher again and begin preparations for battle. They thought they could take everything from me, but I was about to show them exactly what frail old Evelyn was capable of. The conference room in the lawyer's office, where Mr. Fletcher worked, smelled faintly of leather and old coffee. I sat at the polished oak table with Mr. Fletcher beside me. My hands were folded neatly in my lap, but I could feel my pulse drumming in my wrists. The door creaked open. Vanessa swept in first, her heels clicking against the tile. She was dressed in a cream blazer, her lipstick perfect, her chin tilted high. Brian followed, his expression tight, his eyes darting between me and the lawyer. "Mom," he said stiffly, "this meeting wasn't necessary. We could have talked about all this at home." "No," I said evenly, "not this time." They sat across from me. Vanessa crossed her legs and gave a thin smile. "Evelyn, we're worried about you," she began. "You've been under so much stress since Harold passed. It's understandable that you might not be thinking clearly right now." "Cut to the chase," Mr. Fletcher said crisply. "You filed a petition contesting Mrs. Harper's trust and accusing her of mental incompetence. That's not concern, that's an attack." Brian shifted uncomfortably. "We just thought Dad would have wanted us to help manage things. You don't need the burden of the house and the business." "You mean take them from me?" I said quietly. His jaw tightened. "Evelyn," Vanessa said with a sigh, "be reasonable. You're not in a position to." I raised my hand, and for once, she stopped talking. "You've spent weeks under my roof, packing my things into boxes and making plans for a life that doesn't include me," I said, my voice calm but sharp. "You've treated me like an inconvenience in my own home." Vanessa opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the chance. "And now you're trying to paint me as incompetent to steal what Harold left me. But let me make this very clear. Harold trusted me, not you, for a reason." Brian's face flushed red. "You're twisting this, Mom. We're just trying to—" "Trying to what?" I said. "Take everything? Run Harold's business into the ground the way you've already drained the accounts?" His eyes widened. "You've been going through the books?" "Yes," I said simply. "And I know about every loan, every personal expense you tried to hide under the business." Vanessa leaned forward, her voice dropping to a cold hiss. "You really think you're strong enough to fight us? Court cases take time. They take energy. You don't have either." "You're right," I said softly. For a moment, her eyes gleamed with triumph. Then I straightened my back and met her gaze. "But Harold left me something you'll never have. Integrity. And I'll fight for his legacy with every last breath if I have to." Mr. Fletcher slid a folder across the table. "Here's our counter petition. We're not only defending Mrs. Harper's rights, but also seeking repayment of all funds misappropriated by Brian Harper from the family business." Vanessa's smirk faltered. Brian slammed his hand on the table. "This isn't over?" "No," I said calmly. "It's just beginning." As they stormed out of the room, I stayed seated. My hands weren't shaking anymore. For the first time, I felt like Harold would have been proud of me. The letter arrived 2 weeks later. A single sheet of paper, stamped with the county court's seal. Notice of hearing. Petition to contest trust. I stood in the hallway holding it, my thumb brushing Harold's handwriting on the photo frame by the stairs. So this was it. They weren't backing down. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully. Navy skirt, pearl earrings, the same scarf Harold bought me in Paris. "You look like a woman who already won," Iris said softly as she handed me my coat. I smiled faintly. "Let's hope the judge agrees." The courthouse loomed as we pulled up, sunlight glinting off the white stone columns. Mr. Fletcher met me at the steps, his briefcase in one hand. "Today is about truth, Mrs. Harper," he said calmly. "We let their lives collapse under their own weight." I nodded. My fingers brushed the edge of Harold's letter in my handbag. "You're stronger than you know, Evie." And for the first time, I believed him. "All rise." The judge entered, her black robe sweeping as she took her seat. I inhaled deeply and straightened my shoulders. It was time. The proceedings began. Brian's lawyer went first. "Your Honor, it's clear Mrs. Harper is no longer capable of managing her affairs. Our clients have observed forgetfulness, erratic behavior, and susceptibility to undue influence, likely stemming from her grief." I stared straight ahead, refusing to flinch. When it was Mr. Fletcher's turn, his voice was calm but cutting. "Your Honor, we have medical evaluations confirming Mrs. Harper's mental acuity, witness statements from neighbors and friends testifying to her stability, and documentation showing her son and daughter-in-law's attempts to misappropriate assets for personal gain." He paused, then laid a stack of ledgers on the judge's bench. "These are the business accounts. You'll see unauthorized withdrawals, luxury purchases, and falsified expenses, all tied to Brian Harper." The judge flipped through the pages silently, her expression unreadable. Then she looked up. "Mrs. Harper, please take the stand." The room blurred as I rose, but my steps were steady. I placed my hand on the Bible, swore my oath, and sat in the witness chair. "Mrs. Harper," the judge said, "do you believe your son and daughter-in-law acted in your best interest?" "No, Your Honor," I said clearly. "They acted in their own." "Explain." "They told me this house wasn't mine. They boxed up my belongings while I slept. They tried to convince me I couldn't manage my life without them." My voice caught for just a moment, but I forced myself to continue. "They underestimated me. And they underestimated Harold. He trusted me to protect what we built together. That's why he left everything in my name." Vanessa's lawyer jumped in. "Mrs. Harper, isn't it true you've been under immense emotional stress? Perhaps you don't remember conversations correctly?" I turned to her, my gaze steady. "I remember every word. And for the first time, I'm not letting anyone rewrite my story." The courtroom fell silent. The judge shuffled the papers in front of her, then set them down with a soft thud. "This court finds no evidence of mental incompetence or undue influence," she said firmly. "The trust stands as written. All property, business holdings, and assets remain under Mrs. Harper's sole control." Brian's head dropped into his hands. Vanessa's mouth fell open. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "Mr. Harper and Mrs. Harper Wells are hereby ordered to begin repayment of all misappropriated funds to the Harper family business." The gavel came down with a decisive crack. It was over. As I stepped out into the crisp afternoon air, the sun hit my face like a blessing. "You did it," Mr. Fletcher said softly. "No," I said. "Harold and I did it, together." Behind me, I heard Brian's angry voice, Vanessa's shrill tone. But I didn't turn around. They didn't matter anymore. I was free. 2 weeks later, the movers were back. But this time, they weren't packing my life into boxes. They were packing Brian and Vanessa's. I stood in the doorway as they carried out designer bags, wine racks, and furniture Brian had insisted on moving in, quote, temporarily. Vanessa followed them, her arms crossed tight, her face pale with rage. "You'll regret this, Evelyn," she hissed. "You'll end up alone." I met her glare with calm I didn't know I possessed. Alone is better than being used. By noon, the house was quiet again. No more Vanessa's perfume clinging to the curtains. No more Brian's voice dripping with entitlement. Just me and the faint scent of lemon polish on Harold's oak floors. I didn't cry. Not this time. That afternoon, I drove to the oceanfront cottage Harold had left me. The air smelled of salt and wildflowers. Seagulls wheeled overhead as I stepped onto the porch, the wooden planks creaking softly under my feet. Harold's letter crinkled in my pocket. "This was always for you, Evie. A place to breathe. A place to be free." I ran my fingers over the doorframe, smiling through the ache in my chest. "You gave me my wings, Harold," I whispered. "And I've finally used them." The wind lifted my scarf, carrying it out toward the horizon. For the first time in a long time, I felt light, free. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and let me know which city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and check out my other videos.